I was working with a company in Petaluma, and they'd hired me to work with all the marketing managers, helping them design the talks for a company meeting. Went very well, so they said, can you work with our president? He's an engineer. He's not a good speaker. He hardly ever speaks. He's been here for 10 years. He's only been president for 8 months. They see him as a very supportive guy, but they don't see him as presidential. Also, although business was quite good last year, sales were flat. This is a sales meeting. A lot of the salespeople are new. Can you help him write a speech, make him look presidential, and you've got 3 hours? Well, I like a challenge as much as anyone else. So I asked a few questions about his background of his secretary. Remember, a key to connection is conversation. The secret of conversation is to ask questions, and the quality of the information you receive depends on the quality of your questions. So I met this gentleman, Barry, and I said, I know you don't know me, but you have to trust me. You're not very experienced, but I've been doing this for a long time. I've been going to conferences and see presidents and CEOs give good speeches and inspire the troops, or seen them do pitifully and demotivate everyone. Now, we don't have very much time, so you need to do exactly what I tell you. I am your new best friend. My brother says, I'm not surprised my sister gets paid to tell people what to do. She was a very bossy little girl. So I said, all right, everyone tells me you're very supportive. And you're very ethical. Where did that come from? Tell me about your parents. I hear you're interested in sports. What sports? And out of his mouth he said, when I was 7 years old on the water polo team, because I was seen as a team player but also had leadership inclinations, they put me on the fast track for the Olympics. I said, you have to say that in your speech, because that proves you've been in training for that job since you were 7 years old. See, I don't write speeches for people. I ask them questions and pull their ideas out and help them organize them. Then he told me about going to the Olympics in Mexico City. And he said, even though we lost, it was an exhilarating feeling. He talked about going to Russia, where the best water polo players were, that would practice with, and then going to the Olympics in Munich. I maintain the best material of our speeches we never put in our talks. They are the stories that we regale our friends and family with over the dinner table. This man was not a good speaker, but he was telling me these beautifully crafted stories he'd been telling his kids and telling his dinner guests. So I said, what you need to do is, now he told me these stories across the table. I said, I want you to stand up, answer the questions people have in their mind. I said, what your employees are thinking is, where is he taking this company? How secure is my job? Sales were flat last year. What are we going to do this year? So I said, stand up, walk out and say, if I were you, I'd be wondering, who is this guy, Barry such and such, and where is he taking the company in the future? Before I tell you where I'm going, let me tell you where I came from. I said, you do the 2 sentences about your parents, you talk about being 7, and you tell these 3 marvelous stories. Can you see the first row in his speech? Because all I do is stand in the training room with a man who is not a good speaker, with the diagram you have in front of you on the wall. And I said, okay, this is your opening. This is, you answered the questions that they have of you, and these are the first 3 stories. Now, the next line is, this is how you upgrade headquarters. This is how you upgraded the products that you had problems with. Now you need to upgrade the salespeople. Yes, he said, that's right. But for the first 8 minutes of his speech, he is eloquent and elegant as he tells these stories he's told in conversation. So that builds his confidence. In his mind, he sees the diagram. And the last 3 sentences, I said, you want your salespeople to be business consultants? Yeah, that's right. Well, give them these questions to ask. Then he gave his speech twice. I gave him the tape. I said, go get your secretary to transcribe it. You're not going to read it, but you're going to look at it. You're going to underline what are the points of wisdom. You're going to find any repetitive words that you're going to edit it out so you can see it. And 10 days after I met with him, this man who was not a good speaker stood up and gave a talk with no notes that motivated his employees. That's the power of a structure. And that was the perfect formula for him. Where he came from, where they are, where are they going in the future? That was the last row without grading the salespeople. Then it stands to reason if you start at the beginning, you start in the middle. A logical way to outline a speech would be you start at the end. The end of the story, not the end of the speech. I was speaking at a National Speakers Association conference in Phoenix. And a young man, friend of mine, Scott Halford, told a story in another session. His opening line was, "It was the scariest experience of my life." As a young man, I'd always been interested in movies, and my parents were very supportive. I grew up to be a documentary filmmaker. And we went and made a documentary about death row. And I actually had a week in solitary confinement, and we got to as far as strapping me in Sparky, the electric chair. And he said, "Patricia, how would you tell that story?" And I said, "Can I do it in my session tomorrow?" And I asked him a few details. Well, what do they actually do before they put you in the electric chair? Well, they shave your head, and they get this wet sponge, and they tape it to you, and they put this helmet, and they strap you in. This is what I mean by begin at the end. I said, why don't you walk out and say, "It was the scariest experience of my life. My head was shaved. The wet sponge was taped to my forehead. I was strapped in Sparky, the electric chair." Now, what are you thinking? How did he get out? He looked so respectable. What did he do? But the point is, when you have a dramatic opening, the audience is sitting forward, waiting to what came next. That's the end of his speech, the way he did it. Then you go back to the beginning. When I was a young man, I always loved movies. And my parents really supported me as I went to film school. I went out to become a documentary filmmaker. And then you go on. Doesn't that make sense? So let's look at 3 ways. Start at the beginning, start in the middle, start at the end. And I promised you 4. This is basically what Mike Powell did. I don't care what you do in your life, what job you have, or maybe it's just about being a Toastmaster. When you go to cocktail parties, people always ask you the same questions. Make a list of all the questions people ask about being a Toastmaster or being whatever it is you are. So if you have a speech to give, you could just stand up and very simply say, "These are the 5 questions I most frequently asked about being a nuclear engineer." Or about belonging to Toastmasters. You write those 5 things down, you look at them, you look at the first one, put your notes down, and you answer them conversationally. You may never have done it in a speech before, but you've done it so many times at cocktail parties, it's pretty much the same. You stand up and do it just a little bit larger than life. Please like and subscribe and tell me what content you want me to create next.